All right, we are back. It's our final segment this morning with Davidson County Sheriff Darren Hall. Good to have him on with us. We can take some calls more if you'd like to join us, 737-7587. We've got some lines open. You know, a big hearing is scheduled for this Friday. It's going to be Brandon Vandenburg. And finally, a lot of people maybe don't even realize this or have forgotten because so much has happened, that he is still awaiting sentencing in the Vanderbilt rape case. Corey Beatty already had been. Brandon Vandenburg now will be sentenced. He's been incarcerated by you since his conviction now for several months now. So the way that's going to play out is he'll be brought in on Friday, and after his sentencing comes down, what's the protocol?
Yeah, we on a case like that, we'll probably get the paperwork that afternoon and then move him, you know, physically, because we're aware of what's going on. Typically,
because he'll be in the courtroom,
right?
Of course,
right. And typically it's a week or two just to get the paperwork and get it all cleared up, and then we pack it up and move. And we usually don't go to and from the prison on a regular basis anymore. We usually do that weekly. Okay. So, so I suspect he'll go that night or soon thereafter. Usually there's family and attorneys trying to visit and do a few things, and then we try to get it all packed up and go. And as you're aware, it came out last time, the whole sex offender registry situation kind of kicked in. And it
was really interesting because if you saw, I had a story on Thursday where I went and through your office, it's all public record, obtained copies of the phone calls he made. Now, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. It's very interesting to me. Vandenburg, from the time he's been incarcerated till now, I asked for them all, and there are hundreds of calls. Now, how does that work where he has that much time and access? He's constantly calling, and you're wondering how you, the taxpayer, are not paying for that. These are either from prepaid phone cards that have been prepaid for him, or he's making collect calls, most of them long distance to his loved ones, I think, in California on the West Coast. But first, I was very surprised, how many calls he made and how he has that kind of access. I guess, how does that work out? And second, just the way he discussed it, he was following Corey Beatty, and he even said, I didn't want to get in trouble like he did when they asked me to sign the paperwork, so I just signed it, But how does he have access? I mean, I'm telling you, Sheriff, I thought, okay, maybe a couple calls a week. Hundreds, and most of them are innocuous, just blah, blah, just whatever. Some stuff is pretty interesting, and we may have more coming, but how so many? Yeah,
so just imagine, there's a lockdown period at night. Let's just say 11 o'clock until 6 in the morning, just using that. So that's off limits basically. But everything else, other than count time, visitation, recreation, those types of things, the phones are accessible in the housing unit for people to go to. The only issue that would interfere with his chance to do that is, as I mentioned earlier, if there were many more people trying to use it at the same time or as often as he does. Because it's not costing the taxpayer any money. It's if the individual can afford it on the other end, the receiving of the call.
Then they're paying for it.
How
long are the calls? Because I can hear at the end you have 30 seconds left.
15 minutes.
15 minutes per. And after he hangs up, and that can he call? Yes. And he said they hear it, and they say, "Oh, I don't like hearing that message." Whoever he's talking to, he goes, "I know, I'll call you back." And he hangs up. And if there's no one in line behind him, he can just call him back.
Call him again. Yeah, and that adds up to a lot of money. I mean, there are people.
I'm telling you, someone's paying buku bucks. Right. Collect calls to reverse a call is automatically more expensive anyway, because I've taken some from inmates in the past. Right. And I'm like, wow.
I forget. And again, we've just adjusted the rates and lowered our overall the rate that the individual's paying. But it's a I mean it's accessible. I mean, where we're headed in the industry of technology in our world is that eventually every inmate will have a tablet. Now that sounds soft and coddling, but what it really is that tablet will have all your medical information, all of your programming opportunities. What I mean by that is you have education on there, you have AA and NA meetings and information, and you also will be able to communicate via your loved ones. We would control who you can talk to, meaning you can't call your drug dealers and your charge partners and all that. But I mean, we just like we do now, we limit your calls.
Will it be text messages or emails, or
both.
You'll be able to talk onto it?
Both.
Talking too.
Right. And we're rolling that out right now. We're doing some work with that right now. Cool. But here's the future. The reason you do that is you don't have to have TVs eventually in the cell. You don't have to have phones where everybody's arguing over who to call. Eventually, it's all on that one device. I have a 22-year-old and a 14-year-old. They probably wouldn't know how to call me on the phone. This is how they live.
That's my son's
where
like that.
We're going. And so the future of this whole world is not to make it, look, we want them to stay in contact with family. They deserve to do that, and attorneys and everyone else. But it's moving away from the traditional get on the phone on the side on the we used to call them pay phones. You don't even use that term anymore. So yeah, you're moving to this type. You would text message and email. We would control all that information and also use it as a phone. And that device will serve as all your information, your medical information. You go to the nurse, you hand that in, they scan, they go.
Oh, okay.
So it cleans up a lot of data.
How aware are you, how aware do you think the inmates are that all their conversations are being recorded? Because here's the truth is, it's not something that's a secret. The first thing you get on, and when Sheriff Robert Arnold,
Right.
From Rutherford County, who's incarcerated right now in detention in Kentucky, calls me.
Right.
Or he's called me once or twice. And I'm always acutely aware that everything's being recorded.
Right.
And it says so at the very beginning, but I will tell you, if you followed any of that, he said some crazy things lately that's gotten him in trouble, that's probably going to keep him behind bars, and calls to his wife. And you're like, are you aware that you are being recorded? And now, the Vandenburg calls I've heard, I haven't heard anything excruciating damaging. How can it be more damaging than where he is now? Same thing with Corey Beatty, but still there's things on there. Are they aware, or do you think they get into it and they start in the conversation, and before you know it, they just kind of forget?
I compare it to this. I don't watch a lot of TV, but the Big Brother, when it first came out, we had these cameras running around, and I always thought, how are these people acting that way? And they say you develop this, and you guys live it every day, I guess, but you develop this kind of you're immune to it, and so I think that's what happens. I mean, I can't tell you. Many murders and high-profile cases have been solved in this town with the help of someone saying, I popped him last night at the Waffle House. Well, that pop was shooting someone at the Waffle House. We turn that information over. It clearly is indication.
Well, how often? Yeah, and exactly. And like Vandenberg's already been convicted, but you also sometimes house inmates that are awaiting trial, and they get on there and say things that they shouldn't say. Now, in a case like Vandenburg, and I guess you don't have to monitor it because he is convicted, but when they're making that many calls, you don't really have the staffing to monitor every. How do you go about doing that? If there's will the DA maybe flag and say, look, we think this guy's going to say something. Could you pay closer attention to him? You're still recording him like anyone else, right? Is that how that works?
Yes. You can, a couple of ways. It can come from the DA, the police department, or other law enforcement agencies. Hey, we're aware of something, a subpoena, or we'd like to monitor this or that. It's already being recorded.
It's nothing. Yeah.
The second part of that is the technology is sophisticated enough that we can code it to listen for certain words.
Oh.
And it allows, that helps.
So it kicks in, because I'll tell you, I'm going through these Vandenburg calls, and like I said, there's some interesting ones, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of
It's a hard, but and again, our goal in an ideal world is, as long as it's not threatening or to escape or harm yourself or harm other people, or this, really we have very little interest, obviously, if it was to help solve the crime or whatever, but there's really no way to do that without being able to record it, and make sure that that information is not damaging. But there's so many, and again, if you can afford it, if the person on the outside is willing to pay for it, I mean, it's it can be. Now, clearly, if Vandenburg was using the phone, other inmates want to use the phone. If he were trying to, as we call it, run the phone, we don't want anybody boiled in bleach anymore. But the truth is, there are ways that we can manage him to not have but so many calls a day. But as long as everybody's getting their calls, and a lot of people can afford to do that.
I know. I was going to say they can't afford to, and maybe others have people that can come visit. I don't know what his visitation schedule is like, but his family all lives on the West Coast. So the calls are very important, I suppose.
That's right. That's the only contact you have when you're living like that.
And is in your mind, this kind of access, I would think to some degree you have no objection to it, as long as they're not plotting some crime by phone, because I would almost think it makes the inmate more pliable, because they're a little, at least they're talking to someone as opposed to being alone. And
Nick, no matter what you think, I mean, as a person, there's two things that are clear. A person awaiting trial and is in jail doesn't do as well in a courtroom as a person who's on bond and living free and talking to their family and their attorneys and preparing their case. It's just true. So for you to be in jail awaiting trial for something that's significant, staying in contact with your family is both therapeutic, I'm sure, and helpful, but also it's important to your case. I mean, it just is. I mean, if you're out and you can go meet with your attorneys and talk with family and make, that's one thing. But if you're in jail, your attorney access and your access to your family is important. If you're convicted, your relationship with your kids and your family while doing your time is critical, and so it is to your re-entry in the community. It would be wrong to assume you lock people up and sentence them to prison and they can't have any contact with anybody, because when they come out, there's no chance in the world they're going to be successful in being productive. So we want that continuation, both pre-trial and post-trial. And some out there don't understand why you let them have anything. Some of these crimes are horrendous. I understand that.
But again, no one's paying for this, besides the inmate themselves.
That's right.
Nothing out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's not a right that
You can take away phone privileges.
except attorneys.
Except attorneys.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, the attorneys are the only ones that
You
will
would
have access.
guarantee-
That
and
makes
we don't
sense.
record those, by the way.
I was gonna say, okay, that's the only ones you won't
Yes.
record is an attorney's phone call.
So you're an attorney. How
Yeah.
we do? We take that number and block it from being recorded. So I call you, it would never be recorded. We don't listen. We don't have it. There's nothing. Your number is blocked from being recorded. Is how we do that.
I see. But other than that, everyone
Everything's
else
recorded.
is fair game. Inmates still get letters.
Yes.
Okay, but not as many as they used to.
And we're trying to get away from that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but the answer is there's some jails in the country that do a postcard only. You can mail in something written on a recipe style card, but we still do letters and do other things.
Well, it's
I think
nice for us as journalistic. You know what we do. I've written to inmates in your jail before, and the reason I write them, I'm seeking an interview or information on a case if they're willing to talk to me. It's sometimes difficult to reach them,
Right.
and so I go to them first, and then of course we have to go through their attorney and you if they agree to do an interview. But that's the way I do it because I can't call them, right?
Right. And I think technology is moving so far though that what you're seeing in a lot of jails is you have a kiosk in the center of a day room area where they live, and they would go up, enter their code number, and then text Nick.
Okay.
So, and then you can
long
text
as you have
him
my
back,
number,
and then when I
yeah.
go back to that number, I pull up my account and I go, "Wow, Nick's text me back." I mean, and that will cost money
Oh,
too.
well,
It's
okay,
not-
that's handy then. I
Right.
just need to make sure they get my number and
Right,
everything. And sometimes I do that in a letter.
Yeah, and we're moving away. I say we, society, really. There's not a lot of letters written anymore.
No,
and
you're right.
So I think we being in the business that we're in, have to find ways for them to communicate that's safe.
Do you even know what a stamp costs these days? What is it, 38 cents
I have
maybe?
no
Something
idea.
like Listen, thank you for coming. This was an interesting conversation today. Learned a
Well,
lot today.
enjoyed
Thank you
it.
for coming on,
Thank
sir.
you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. I'll be back, wrap things up. Programming note about tomorrow right after this.